The small car category is used by manufacturers to group together the cars that you and I are most likely to buy. And these three, the Ford Focus, the Vauxhall Astra and the Peugeot 306, fit that category quite nicely. In their history, some shorter than others, they boast accolades such as best handling car, best small car, the list goes on. But which is really the best? And as they all have a similar price tag, which one would you actually buy? Well, we've gathered them all together today to take a look in depth and give you our impressions. Back in the early 90s, with the VW Golf getting bigger, more luxurious and softer in its responses, the Peugeot 306 stepped forward as the class benchmark for ride and handling. On the road, the car feels very compact. It actually feels smaller than the other two. It does have a very, very slick gearbox, which makes for smooth driving. And technical types would tell you that the rear suspension has been specially designed to turn in. Well, that actually means it's a lot of fun through the corners. And that's the main word here, fun. It's a very fun car to drive. But it's never going to set the world on fire aesthetically. I'm not saying it's an ugly car, far from it, but it is a bit bland and starting to look a bit dated. I can still see echoes of the shape of the older and smaller 205, and that's from years ago. And it's even worse in here. The dashboard layout is logical enough, but it is terminally bland. At best, the 306 was only ever average in this department, and now it's allowed itself to be left well behind the opposition.
Something which can't be said of the Astra Sport. Stung by the press criticism of the Astra last time, Vauxhall were determined not to get left behind by the opposition. So they brought in Lotus to hone the suspension and quell once and for all those rumours of soggy handling. And it worked. The steering really is much sharper. You can turn tightly into bends and revel in the kind of handling that briefly wrestled the crown of the Drivers' Championship from the 306. In short, it's a great driving experience and a fantastic driver's car. Unfortunately, the interior didn't take that same leap forward, although there is a definite improvement in quality over the previous Astras. The layout is simple and fuss-free, it's just a bit bland. The whole thing feels as if it hasn't been designed, but it's been assembled. I'm afraid it's straight to the back of the class for Vauxhall for some more lessons in style. And I'm afraid that those lessons in styling also need to be applied to the outside. The Astra looks solid. It's certainly never going to set the world alight or make heads turn to get a second look. This line that runs from the top of the headlights to the taillights at the rear gives the car deep size and creates a kind of chunky feeling. That's added to by the cut-off squared headlights at the front and the abrupt end to the rear. The whole look is solid and adventurous and very middle of the road. They'll sell millions. When it launched, the Astra took the 306's crown as the best handling car in its class. But Vauxhall must have been kicking themselves. There's been a revolution in the hatchback market, and a few weeks after the Astra came along, Ford swept them away with the Focus.
The Ford Focus was launched to a huge media hype, and it did make quite an impact in what had become a very staid market. Now, I know taste is a very subjective thing, but I think Ginny and I are going to have to disagree on this, because I think the Ford Focus looks awful. The problems start at the front end. The headlight is just hacked in regardless. The sides of the car would have flowed reasonably well, except that the designers felt that they had to get out the stencil set and cut in a load of geometric shapes for no apparent reason. And then we get to the real problem area for the Focus. It's got a big, fat, well, rump is the politest way of putting it, above which are these taillights. They're just cut in again. There's no regard for harmony whatsoever. I could never forgive this car for having this face.
I'll take those, thank you very much. Well, Rich has got one thing right. I love the shape of the Focus. He misses the point completely. It's bold, it's original, it's different, for heaven's sake. Richard will be telling me next that his favourite fashion designer is Marks and Spencer's. I just wish that more car manufacturers would offer us something that breaks the mould once in a while. And my enjoyment of looking at this car is only increased when I open the door. At last, somebody has realised that we spend most of our times sitting inside a car looking at the interior. Just take a look at this wonderfully sculpted dash, and those gorgeous geometric shapes that Richard was just too square to handle have been carried on from outside in here. And as usual, there's Ford's clever attention to detail that makes the driver's life so much easier. Love or loathe the Focus, you could never accuse it of being bland. And once underway, the story simply gets better. In recent years, Ford have transformed their cars from rather lacklustre driving experiences into class leaders, and the Focus is no exception. Even the bumpiest of road surfaces seems smooth, and it's guaranteed to entertain you no end on your favourite A-roads. A clever multi-link rear suspension helps to raise the game way above the competition. But driving pleasure apart, this is a practical car. It's easy to park and it's great fun for nipping around town in. It really is a class act. And for the sensible amongst you, the body of Ford's Focus is galvanised and it comes with a 12-year anti-corrosion warranty.
In gear trim, but with the same 1.8-litre Zetec engine, the Focus is comparable with the Astra 1.8 Sport and the 306 XS we have here today, in price and specification. They all come in at around about the £15,000 mark.
Which you choose would depend on your priorities, on whether or not you fancy a little bit of flair in your life. Because for me, the Focus is streets ahead. It looks fantastic and it's got twice as much style as the other two. Plus, it's the undisputed king when it comes to driving pleasure.
Whereas for me, that new edge design is too reminiscent of the jelly mould of the Sierra era that's been the victim of a frenzied attack by Edward Scissorhands. No, I'd have to have the more subdued Astra, even though it's probably so subdued I'd never be noticed at all. I know.
Yes, if you're not too bothered about being noticed, the Vauxhall Astra Sport is a huge improvement over the previous model, but it is never going to make you stand out in a crowd.
For so long the best driver's car in the class, the opposition has caught up with the 306. It's still a good buy, but in present company, Peugeot's old stager falls back to the bottom of the pile.
And whether you love or you loathe its looks, there can be no denying the impact the Focus has made to the hatchback market. Dynamically, it leaps to the top of its class.